Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Automate and Streamline Your Client Communication webinar. As always, I'm Sam. I'm a client success coach here at PaintScout. And today we're going to dive into how to automate and improve your client communication using PaintScout's auto follow-ups and email templates. So by the end of the session today, you're going to know how to, first of all, set up auto follow-ups to stay on top of your estimates and your invoices, create and customize email templates for consistency and efficiency, and then, of course, best practices to increase your response rate and close more deals. So if you have any questions as I go, please feel free to drop those in the chat and I will get to those at the end during our Q&A session as always. So like normal, we're going to talk about why these things matter. So follow-ups and email templates matter because first of all, following up at the right time can, significantly improve your close rates. It's no secret to anyone here that having a good sales process leads to more sales. So today we're going to touch on how and when you should follow up to improve your sales process and just really dial everything in. Second of all, consistent email communication is really going to help build trust with your clients. You want to show your clients that you're reliable and can be trusted, and communication is a great way to do that. And then finally, automations can save you time and they ensure that no opportunity slips through the cracks, which is obviously great. So as always, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. To get started, we're going to head to our follow-up section. So you should find your follow-up section by clicking your person icon in the top right corner. We're going to go to the account settings section, and then from the left-hand side, you should be able to see communications and then auto follow-ups here. Now, just so you know, if you don't actually see the communication section in your settings, that means that your communications live under your profile, and that's an older PaintScout feature. So we do recommend switching communications over to your settings if you are interested, because if you have multiple users, or even if you are planning on adding, users in the future, having everything in your account settings is really going to streamline your process because your sales reps or your employees, they don't have to create these follow-ups every single time you sign somebody new up. Instead, you can just create these follow-ups from your account settings, and it's going to apply for anybody that you add in the future. So if you do not have setting-based communications, as in your communications live under your profile, and you want to migrate them over to the account settings, please reach out to support@paintscout.com, or you can use that little chat bubble in the bottom right corner of your PaintScout screen. That's going to connect you with Emily, and she can help you out with that from there. So before we get into actually building the follow-ups, I want to take some time to just talk about what they are, when you should use them, that kind of thing. So first of all, follow-ups in PaintScout are going to be these automated communications with your customers that are based on their interactions with documents during a designated time frame in PaintScout. So follow-ups are really there just to make your life easier for you and for your sales team. So with all that said, our most successful users are actually going to use follow-ups to assist in their sales process, but they understand that these follow-ups do not replace manually following up with a client. Now, the Price Sell Paint podcast has an amazing episode on following up, and that's what I'm basing a lot of my info on today. So if you have not seen that episode, I highly recommend that you check it out. You can find that on our YouTube page. But basically, to give you the key highlights, they really talk about how, following up starts at the time of the estimate. So ideally, when you present an estimate to a client, you are looking for a yes or a no. And if the client can't give you a yes or a no in that moment, it's always best to set a date and a time to follow up with them. And in my opinion, and then John and Michael's opinion as well, that follow-up should really be a conversation. So whether that's in person or over the phone, you want to be available to answer their questions, objection handle, and you want to have a bit of a back and forth conversation. So again, our most successful users are not using these auto follow-ups to replace that manual follow-up step, but instead they're using auto follow-ups to make the manual follow-up stage more effective. So in that episode, Michael Murray talks about, how he's not using follow-ups to ask for a close. In his opinion, that's the sales rep's job. But instead, he's using these follow-ups to help clients make decisions faster. So he might have a follow-up that talks about, different paint products. He might also have a follow-up that talks about colors, as in like their favorite colors, color of the year, that kind of stuff. And then he also might have a follow-up that showcases their, testimonials. And so Well, he's not directly asking for a close in any of those follow-ups. What he is doing is indirectly objection handling, right? Because you never know. Your client might be sitting there thinking, like, I definitely want to move forward with the painting, but picking the colors is really stressing me out. Or I don't know which products I should go with. Or I have two bids from two really great companies and I don't know which one to pick, right? So having all of that information in these automated follow-ups is first of all going to save you time because you don't have to do that stuff manually. But second of all, it's keeping consistent communication between you and your client. So it's going to keep or it's going to help keep you at the top of their minds. And it also just makes sure that it makes you seem like you're really consistent and reliable. So let's talk about when you should use follow-ups in PaintScout. Now, I have seen ranges all over the place when it comes to following up, so there's really no black and white answer that I can give you. But what I will say is that I know that your job is not to be following up with the same client every single week for a year or for 2 years. Because at a certain point, it's going to become annoying for your clients, and it's also just going to get out to be a waste of time for you too, right? So, what Michael and John agree on in that episode is that the first 30 days is really important when it comes to following up. So, if you can, you want to try and get a yes or a no within those 30 days and focus your follow-ups during that time frame. Now, John and Michael also mentioned in that episode that they like to give the clients a call, no answer, they leave a voicemail, and they send an email and they call it a breakup email. And essentially, at the end of the 30 days, what they're saying is, I don't want to keep bugging you. Your estimate is about to expire. Can I close your project? And this really creates urgency with your clients. And according to John and Michael, this has a pretty good response rate because those who are interested but just haven't had time to make a decision will probably let you know that. Now, all of that to say, just because it's been 30 days does not mean that you should never touch base with the client again. Michael points out that sometimes these jobs are 10, 15, $20,000 and the client might have just been window shopping at the time, but now they want to get the painting done, so they're saving up for it. So they just weren't able to make that decision right away. But following up in a year to 2 years, can even be great. It can be beneficial because maybe it's going to bring that back to the top of their mind and they're going to go, okay, yeah, let's do it. I want to move forward. So while you don't want to be bombarding your clients because there is such a thing as following up too much, you do want to remember that some of your clients are really going to appreciate these follow-ups. It makes them feel like they're still at the top of your mind, it makes them feel like you're consistent, you're reliable, and that you really appreciate and you really want their business. So I know that that was a really long spiel and that was a lot of information. So just as a recap, follow up multiple times within the first 30 days. And then again, in a couple times, let's say like a year and 2 years out. But with all of that said, you want to play around with follow-ups, figure out what works for you, your business, and your sales process. So now let's talk about building follow-ups in PaintScout. So as you can see, I'm in my auto follow-up section in PaintScout here, and I already have some pre-built follow-ups, but I will be scrolling down and you're going to see there's the new follow-up button that you can click. And all you're going to do here is follow the steps that you see on screen. So the first step is selecting your document type. Now you can create follow-ups for estimates, which are going to be these pending estimates that haven't been responded to, or for invoices, especially if you have these invoices that are past due and you haven't received a payment yet. For today's example, we're going to build a follow-up for an estimate. Now, step 2 is going to be to select your estimate type. Now, you can either select all and create a general follow-up for all estimate types, or you can get more granular and create these specific follow-ups for specific estimate types. So like Michael talked about where he sends this follow-up message discussing different products and which ones are the best, he's probably creating 2 separate follow-ups, one for interior and then one for exterior. So that's when you would get more granular here. And then step 3 of 4 here is going to be to set your parameters. So you can either choose to send this follow-up if the estimate has been sent, but essentially has not been viewed after a certain period of time, or if the estimate has been viewed but not been responded to after a certain period of time. So I'm going to say in this example, we're sending the estimate, or sorry, sending the follow-up if the estimate has been sent, but has not been, let's say, viewed, and I'm going to set it to 3 days. Now there's also a drop down next to send after if you want to choose from a pre-created, date here, or of course you can just use these custom fields to manually enter that. Now, in my example world, I'm going to say that I usually schedule that follow-up call for 1 week after the estimate. So if by 3 days after I provided them the estimate, they haven't even opened that estimate yet, that's a pretty good indicator that something's a little wrong. Either they didn't receive the estimate, or they're just not interested, or they're looking at other things. And so I want to reach out to them after 3 days. So that's why I'm, creating this parameter here. And then scrolling down, that's going to lead me into actually creating the follow-up. So you're going to see there's a toggle here for email or for text. You can create follow-ups for both. But essentially to enable it, all you have to do is click that little toggle, and then you're going to see that this screen opens up where you can then enter a subject line and a message. So just to save time while we are on our webinar today, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste a pre-created message here. So just give me 2 seconds. Paste that one in, and then let me get the body. Paste that one in, and then I'm just going to format this correctly because I want to make sure you guys can read it easily, and so can my clients. Beautiful. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to notice in my follow-up message here is that I have these funky looking things that we call estimate tags. And so estimate tags are used to pull information from your PaintScout account. Things like the client's name, the client's address, your company name, your contact info, all of that can be auto-filled using tags. So to add a tag, all you have to do is click on that little tag button. Again, there's one in the subject line and then one in the email, and you're going to see a list pops up with these pre-created tags that you can use. Now, this is really going to make your follow-ups more personalized, and obviously it's going to save you time because then you don't have to go through and manually send these emails to each individual client. So the next thing I want to point out here is that the message that I've pasted in here, this is just an example. I created it in like 30 seconds, so please take this with a grain of salt. But the one thing that I do want you to pay attention to in the follow-up message that I have crafted here is my call to action. So essentially, a call to action is just me asking my client to do something. So in here, I've clearly said, please let me know if this estimate's been received so I don't have to keep bugging you. Obviously, asking your client to do something is more likely to get a response than by not asking them to do anything. So I'm giving them a call to action in this follow-up, which I think is very important. And then if I scroll down, you're going to see there's a couple other settings down here. So the first one is to send this follow-up for existing estimates. Now, if you enable this, any estimates that have been sent within the last 24 to 48 hours that meet these parameters, the follow-up is going to send for that as well. So keep in mind, if you enable this setting, it's not going to go way back and send, these follow-ups for estimates that are 2-3 years old. Just anything within the last 24 to 48 hours. So especially if you send an estimate and then you go, oh, I wanted to create follow-ups, you can come into your account settings and then enable this setting down here and you'll be good to go. And then the second setting is send me a follow-up, send me a copy when this follow-up is sent. So if you want to receive an email notification every single time this follow-up is sent to a client, you can go ahead and enable that setting, and then you're going to get an email every single time it goes out. Now, there is also a text portion. So you can also send these follow-ups via text. So same thing as before, you just click on that toggle and then you'll see that the box pops up to write your message. Now, it is important to note that when it comes to text follow-ups, there is a character limit. So this really can't be as bulky as your email. So something that a lot of people do is they're going to take their subject line up here, and they're going to use that in the text portion of their follow-up, and then they might adjust it a little because I still want there to be a call to action. So it says in here, client name, did you receive your estimate? Please let me know. Now, just so you know, both the email and the text follow-up is going to include a link to the estimate. So this message down here is going to say the client's first name, did you receive your estimate? Please let me know, and then just a link to that estimate. So this is great because, if for some reason your client actually didn't receive the emailed estimate because maybe it landed in their spam, or they accidentally deleted it, or they just haven't seen it, you're hitting them with another medium. You're sending them this text, and that's going to make sure that it makes it, to them. I know me personally, I'm somebody who doesn't always check my email because I get so many spam emails. A lot of times, a lot of my emails that are important actually go to spam. And I just get so many marketing emails, right? So I personally am more likely to interact with a text than I would an email. So again, using multiple mediums or multiple ways to connect with your client is definitely great and useful. Now, the last thing I want to note when it comes to creating these follow-ups here is that if something does not meet the parameters, this follow-up will not send. So if your client actually does view the estimate before 3 days, this follow-up is going to disable automatically and you don't have to do anything. I just always like to point that out so you don't think that you have to go through and manually disable and enable follow-ups on a case-by-case basis. Beautiful. So I'm going to hit done and you're going to see that populates down here for me. You're going to get a preview of what it says as well as the email and text being enabled. So now that we've built a follow-up, let's talk about how you can track this in PaintScout. So there's a couple ways. The first is your dashboard page. You obviously have a chat feed on your dashboard page, and anytime a follow-up is sent, you're going to see that posted in here on that chat feed for you. Now you can also see this from the estimate sidebar menu of the estimate itself. So any follow-ups that are sent for a specific client, it's going to live in that sidebar menu under the chat feed, and you can see it here. And then while we're here, I also want to point out that on the sidebar menu of any estimate, you will have the follow-up tab. And so you can go ahead and click on this follow-up tab here. And in here, you can always enable or disable certain follow-ups. So, if you want to disable all of them because maybe this client is just somebody that you're not planning on working with, you can go ahead and just do that from here. Or if you just want to disable an individual follow-up, you can do that as well, especially if maybe you talked to them today and so you don't want that follow-up to send to them tomorrow. You could just come in and disable it. Amazing. Okay, so now that we have discussed follow-ups, we are going to hop into email templates, which is going to go a little bit quicker. So I'm going to start by clicking on my person icon in the top right corner of my screen. I'm going to go to the account settings section, sidebar menu, and then I'm going to go to communications and I'm going to go to email templates. So email templates are great because just like follow-ups, these guys are going to save you time. So I know there's a lot of people who like to add additional information to their estimate emails and their invoice emails, and they're, manually typing that out each time, but you don't have to do that. You can actually edit these email templates in here so it updates automatically and you don't have to do the same things over and over again. So obviously it saves you time, but then second of all, it's going to improve your consistency too. You want to make sure there's consistency across your team. So you want to make sure they're all sharing the same information, they're hitting the same points, and you want to make sure that your tone is consistent with your brand. So to make sure that all of that goes smoothly, use these email templates, create a template that everybody in your account uses. So you're going to see there's basically two sections in the email template section. There's the email sent by your team, which are these emails that you're sending somewhat manually. And what I mean by that is when you're sending an estimate or an invoice or a work order or a payment request, you're hitting that send button and then the email template will pop up for you. So you can come in here, you can click on any of these templates and you're going to see there's a subject line and a body and you can just adjust this like normal. And just like follow-ups, there are also estimate tags that are being used. So you can come in here and add estimate tags as you need as well. And you're going to see that there is an add button. So you can actually create custom templates for estimates. So if you want to have a separate email that sends with an interior estimate versus an exterior estimate, you can create a custom template in here. You're going to want to label it, give it a name so you know what's what. You're going to add a subject line and a body. And then scrolling down, you have the use as defaults for estimate types. And in here, you can select, is this for interiors? Is this for exteriors? Is this for cabinets? And then once you've saved that, then you'll be able to use this template when you're sending your estimates. Now, scrolling down, we do have the email sent automatically page as well. And so these are emails that are being triggered when something happens in PaintScout and it happens automatically. So that's when an estimate is accepted, when an estimate is declined, or when a payment is received. So just like above, you can click on these and you can edit them. There's going to be a subject line and a body. And again, these estimate tags that you can also incorporate into your email. Now, there's no custom template available for these triggers, but of course, you can just edit these emails specifically as you go. Awesome. Okay, So now that we've gone through those templates, let's just recap everything and we're going to talk about some best practices for successful follow-ups and for email templates. So first things first, keeping your emails concise and action-oriented is very important. So I like to add a single call to action to each of my emails, especially my follow-ups, because it's going to give my communication a purpose, right? Now, when you do add call to actions to your emails, you want to be careful not to overwhelm your client. So you don't want to add multiple call to actions, and you really don't want to write a super lengthy, wordy email. I know me personally, and I'm sure most of you are the same. We get an email that's really long, you go, oh, I'll read that later. And then you get busy and you forget. So again, you want to keep your emails concise, you want to keep them action oriented, and you want to make sure that they're clear. Now, the second best practice is going to be to kill two birds with one stone when you can. Okay. So, something like the thank you accepted email, this is a great place to throw in your next steps. I know a lot of people are sending the thank you accepted email because it triggers automatically. And then later they're going and they're sitting down and they're writing this next step email to send to their client. If you can, you might as well just put your next steps directly into this thank you accepted email. So you don't even have to think about it. You know, if a client accepts an estimate, they're getting the next steps right away and they know exactly what they have to do. Another common example I see of this would be the payment received email. I think a lot of times for people who especially don't take deposit payments, they're using the payment received email as a place to ask for reviews because they're basically recording the final payment. Then the client automatically gets an email that says, hey, we verified your payment. Could you please leave us a Google review? And it's great because you can add a link in here if you want. So again, just killing two birds with one stone where you can. Instead of having to do things manually or basically doing things twice, throw it into an email template or a follow-up where possible and save you some time. And the last best practice that I have for you here is just going to be to use estimate tags to add personal touches to your emails and your follow-ups. Especially follow-ups, if you're going to go ahead and create those follow-ups that talk about, let's say, colors and products and testimonials, you don't want to make it seem like your client is just a part of a newsletter. You want to make it seem like you emailed them with a purpose. And so adding a tag can easily do that. You're going to go, hey, client first name. So maybe, hey, Craig. Just wanted to, check in. Are you struggling with picking colors? Here are our favorites. Let the team know if you have any questions, right? That seems personalized and it doesn't seem like a newsletter email. So as for next steps, I just want to say thank you everybody for joining the webinar. As always, I really appreciate it when you guys attend. It makes my day. I will be sending out an email later this week with a link to the webinar recording. I'm also going to send you guys a quick feedback survey. So please let me know what you thought. And also please tell me what you want to see next. I'm all ears and I definitely want to make sure the next webinar is whatever you guys want to see. If you're not joined already, please join our PaintScout Pros group because we will announce all upcoming webinars on there. And I also just wanted to take this moment to announce our weekly drop-in sessions that we just started. So you probably saw this in the PaintScout Pros group and a message in your PaintScout, but we do have these weekly drop-in sessions every Thursday. And if you just want to hop on and ask some questions, if you're looking to see something live over a Zoom call with a PaintScout team member, you can go ahead and register for those. Registering is going to give you access to the next 8 sessions, I believe, and you can just pick and choose which ones you want to show up to. So thank you guys all so much for hopping on. I really appreciate it. And I'll send you guys that email later this week. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday. Bye.